Welcome back to this episode of Conquering Chaos, a mom's guide to self-care and sanity. I'm your host, Sydney Crow, and today we have Carrie Conrad from Detroit. Carrie is also known as Mama Bear Prepared. She is a self-defense expert and really specializes in physical safety in the home for moms and kids. Welcome, Carrie.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy too. So we've been having a little bit of a discussion leading into this podcast, and I'm very intrigued to hear all that you have to say. So why don't you let the listeners know where this came from? Because you have a very, very strong background in self-defense in various modalities, and where this path led you. Because you also have a daughter who's a strong-willed blessing, and you've always felt qualified and capable in raising her. But you told me that you often questioned how other moms do it. So fill us in.
I'll try and make it like brief, right? So I was forced into martial arts by loving parents because they wanted me to be safe because that's what parents do. I stuck with it. It turned out I did a lot of it. I've done a lot of martial arts. I taught martial arts. I still teach martial arts. And then it evolved into it being my passion. I've always done it, and it ended up turning into my profession when I started teaching self-defense because what my friends were showing me they learned in self-defense class, I was horrified. So I started teaching self-defense. And then in like a decade of teaching self-defense, I'm listening to what the trauma that people actually have, that women actually have, the concerns, the real, you know what I mean? Because we have this perspective, society tells us we need to look out for strangers, but in the years of teaching self-defense, moms would be like, hey, how do I defend myself against my kid? How do I keep myself safe and my other children safe? And like you said, like we talked about before, I have a daughter that has a slew of diagnosis codes, and I try to be very careful about, I really don't want to tell her story because she's a person, you know, and a fantastic person at that. But like for my challenges, so all of these years of like martial arts and then getting into violence prevention and then learning de-escalation, like I'm qualified in all of this stuff. I have this child that I am like using all of my skills on.
Yeah.
All the way down to like restraining. I'm like on the floor in public restraining a kid so she doesn't hurt herself or other people. And I'm thinking like, how do other people do this? Because I know exactly what to do. I know what's too much. I know what's gentle. I know I have all these years of experience learning this. So I know.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where all the help that we sought really wasn't helpful. And I learned how unqualified a lot of these therapists were. And it was just a journey. It was a journey. Eventually we did find good therapists.
Good.
But like I said, I learned a lot, and then I just kept coming into other contact with other moms who also were, it's like, because you go to a therapist and they go, oh, they blame the parent. If you just did it right, if you followed my instruction, this wouldn't happen. Oh, it's your relationship with your partner. That's the reason why everything's going wrong. They just, and they mean well and they're teaching what they know, but I can tell you that I have the privilege of helping moms without a supportive partner with like if everything's wrong, you can still do well. You can keep yourself and your children safe, and you can help them do well, even if all their diagnosis codes say they can't.
That's really powerful because there are a lot of boxes, I guess, out there that they want kids to fit into. And when you have diagnosis or you have an extra layer of needs, it like I don't want to say it complicates things, but it adds that extra layer that a lot of people don't have the tools to navigate. And they might be seeking what they think is the right tool, aka therapy, and not finding the right therapist. And, maybe they live in a small town where their resources are very limited. Like that happens a lot. Or like in my case, where we spent 9 years kind of working through the system a little bit, getting little pieces of information, but it wasn't until a doctor tried to close out our file that they were like, oh, maybe we could do one more test. And that's where it came back positive. They're
Wow.
like, there's just all of these loopholes and cracks that people tend to slip through. And so having somebody like you that can, has lived through it, knows all of the training, keeps people safe. What would you say your biggest tips are for families that might be struggling right now to either find the right resources or navigate this kind of on their own until they can find the right resources?
Well, I'm going to need to give you a link because I have a blog article that helps to qualify your help. Because, like, I'm probably not the only mom that knows this, but you go in, you do the intake, and you give them all your stuff, everything that you're vulnerable and you're struggling with and where you're failing, and you give it to them, and then it's not a good fit, and it's just like, that is, I don't know how many times you've done that. I've done that a lot. And
Yeah.
it's just, so I have a blog article that I will share.
Okay.
That's really helpful. I can't say this enough. Moms are more equipped than they give themselves credit.
Mm-hmm.
We are equipped. I don't care what I don't care what kind of specialist you're going to see. If they give you input that just does not feel right, it's probably because it's not.
Mm.
It's probably because it's not,
Yeah.
and I don't want to play partner against partner, but moms know what their kids need. We
Yes.
just we just do. The hard part is being willing to know what our actual instinct is because we get diluted with all the things that people tell us. We doubt ourselves. We listen to all these podcasts, which some of which are great, some of which are, you know what I mean? Like we don't qualify the information that we're getting. So we're just filled with all this stuff like you're bad, you're wrong, like do what you're told because you don't know better. And it's like, it's hard not to buy into that.
Yeah.
But we really do deep down, we really do know what our kids need. And what I loved about your content is seeing like the connection based. Let me tell you, connected people don't hurt people.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I wholeheartedly agree with that statement.
So no matter what, connection and people are like, oh, you don't reward that behavior. Love is not a reward. It's a basic human need. By
Yeah.
the way, people with met needs perform better, including mom.
Yes. Yeah. So let's touch on that because I know that you feel very strongly about making sure that your cup is full, right? So that you can pour into others, so to speak, and make sure that you are showing up as the best version of yourself so that you are capable and can respond instead of react. How does that play into your like physical safety programs and all of that, right? So let's touch on that because that was quite a reaction.
Well, yeah, because I don't want to give like a long answer. I know this is a short
Okay.
spiel. So what happened in like the early years of teaching self-defense classes, like what I can do is I know how to ask the right questions to find out the mental blocks and limitations that prevent people from defending themselves. It's kind of a big deal.
So it sounds like a very huge deal.
Okay, no matter how trained you are, no matter what, like I said, there are mental blocks and limitations, and I find them. And in the beginning, I'd be like, okay, now you know, good luck, you know? Where
Yeah.
it's like today I understand like how to help people work through them.
Mm,
And I'm not sure where I'm going to take that, like honestly, professionally, but I know that it's not done in therapy. And I keep sending people to therapists or coaches, and it's not like other people can't do it. I just have yet to find people who are capable of doing in this specific niche because I'm looking for very certain specific things that allow a person to trust themselves and be willing to speak up. And that's what it takes for our kids. I'm sorry, we have to do hard things. None of it is easy. And if you doubt yourself, how are you supposed to do that? It's hard when you know the right answer. It is absolutely hard when you 100% for sure know the answer. It's hard. So how are
yep.
you supposed to do it when you doubt yourself?
Mhm. Not very well. I'll say that. I spent years in that self-doubt, wondering if I'm doing it right, wondering if I'm the right person for my family, wondering if, all of that. And that's kind of where all of my personal development and my program stem from, because it was so isolating to feel
Yeah,
wrong all the time. And I felt so
yeah,
much guilt and shame around the fact that, you know, I didn't have the answers and I didn't feel like I was capable. And I was like, if I
yeah,
actually start voicing this to anyone, not that I didn't
yeah,
have a decent support system, because I did, but like if I actually told my husband how I felt, or if I told my friends how I felt, if I went to my doctor and was like truly honest about what was going on inside my head, I was like, somebody might take these kids away. Like, let's normalize the fact that moms need a lot of support and that it's okay to not be okay. And
yeah,
there are ways to move through that when we can figure out the right questions and the right support and the right resources to get, right? So
yeah,
I think what you're doing is really, really powerful, because you have really niche, like you've really found a niche that I think needs extra support, right? We talked a little bit about how you are finding moms that maybe have little t or capital T trauma that are, yeah, all right, that's a spectrum too, all in its own. And, we both have strong-willed blessings that have an extra layer of support. And so knowing that there's somebody out there that can physically help keep the physical safety in the home, I think is such a paramount priority. So I give kudos to you for doing that. If there's any tips or tricks, if you had one piece of advice or a top 3 pieces of advice that you would give the listeners out there, what would those be?
trust yourself,
Yeah.
like whatever that takes. And if you're confused, it's okay to be confused, but like really, like trust yourself. And then connection always works. Love has never hurt anybody.
Mm,
Even if you're like, oh, is this enabling or is this love? Err on the side of giving too much love, like
mm,
for real. And then lastly, like just because of some of the stuff that we touched on, if anybody is listening and there is violence in your home, maybe you don't want to call it that. Maybe it's just scary. Maybe it's difficult. Maybe, but if there's any physical harm, it is an absolute privilege for me to be available to just listen and connect with moms. Cause like you said, like that, it's hard. It's hard to cover a black eye from your own kid. Like
mm,
that is just, it's a domestic violence relationship. You can't leave. Not only can you not leave, you're responsible for it.
mm.
It's dark. It is dark and it is an absolute privilege to be available. So if anybody relates, like you're not alone. I talk to moms like that all the time, and please feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. I appreciate that so much, Carrie. And it has been a pleasure getting to know you and having you on the show. Thank you guys for tuning in today to today's episode where we help you conquer the chaos one day at a time.